Hello and welcome to the Mind Body Soil podcast, a podcast where we explore the innate connection between the mind, the body and the soil. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Smart Soil. Smart Soil is an online education platform creating courses and providing resources from farmers for farmers. Join us as we share the stories and experiences from those dedicated to regenerating ecosystems, communities and human beings. Here today joined by Blair Beattie. G'day, Blair.
G'day, David. How are you, mate?
Yeah, lovely, mate. Bloody good to have you here. Thanks so much for joining us. I wanted to start today's chat off with going down memory lane a little bit, and perhaps it could be last week, it could be a couple of months ago, but just starting with recalling an impactful moment from your journey, something that may have, turned you onto your food journey, into ag or whatever it was, something that lit the fire.
Yeah, okay, so you're making the assumption that I have a memory and I haven't obliterated that. So thank you.
Pleasure.
What's popped up real quick for me, and it's something that I've always harked upon because it's been one of those pivotal points in my life. And it was such an amazing experience that I'll always draw upon that as one of the pivotal pieces of my existence. And it was in the 90s, so yeah, I'm pretty old. And it was in Peru, and it was during a medicine ceremony, which we don't need to go into detail about what that was, but I sat with some of the local villagers there, and they were all singing, and it was only moments later, or a little while later, that I understood who they were singing to. And they were singing to the trees.
Wow.
And the trees were singing back. And it was at that moment that I had this realization, and not just a conscious, it was an experience of our interconnection to nature, and how, looking back and forward, how we've lost that, and how do we maintain that, and how do we embody that and understand it, and try and look back on and create those beautiful ancient futures where we're taking all that old tech and reinstilling it into us now, that ability to connect with and understand, and then create a feedback loop of. So that sat with me forever, and obviously till this day, because when you asked that question, that's what popped into my head.
Dang. Have you been back since, Blair, to do more to do another medicine ceremony, or?
Not. There was a few over that period,
mm-hmm.
and I think that was enough.
Yeah.
And that stood me in good stead for that time. There's been other ceremonies, but I've never been back to that area again. I think they got what I needed to out of that experience, and maybe got told what I needed to.
Yeah. I think it was Terence McKenna or someone. I'll butcher it, but it was something like, when you hear that voice telling you to stop, it's a good time to stop.
Yeah, it's a good time to listen, right?
I think it's not off the table to talk about what we're referring to with this medicine, Blair, in this discussion. I don't think, because I've also been to Peru and sat with the shamans and done plant medicines, and for me also it was a really pivotal moment in my life, and actually tied in with the whole conception of Smart Soil. I went to Peru for some context at the end of my vagabonding journey after going to India, doing yoga teacher training and all that sort of stuff, Mexico, and about 18 months on the road. And before I left my trip, I always had it in my mind that I wanted to go to Peru and sort of just tie everything together with an ayahuasca ceremony. And I managed to do it. I managed to get there at the end, and it just, because my reason for doing so was like, well, what is my purpose? What am I here to do? It's all well and good to go back to the West and live the hippie life or whatever I want to do, but where's the purpose in it? So really asking that question with that intention going into that ceremony, it wasn't till a couple of days later that it actually surfaced, sort of out of a dream, but it was something like, soil doctor, or it was about just working with soil. And I was just like, holy shit, there it is, you know. And it wasn't like a, you know, when you have a dream and you're sort of trying to bring it back in. It was almost like a knowing, like it was a, like you're saying, experience of knowledge or a calling. It was profound, because obviously everyone expects it to happen during the ceremony or while you're, but I mean, half the time you're just trying to surrender to what's going on in the ceremony. Could you explain what ayahuasca is? I'm assuming that's what you're referring to.
Yeah. It was, I can't remember when it was, but it was in the late 90s. I was on my worldly quest. I'd read all these books and wanted to learn more and experience and more. And I'd always been a bit of a psychonaut in my younger days, but wanted to bring purpose to that and teaching to that and be guided through the beauty. And was lucky enough to find a shaman. And yeah, it was an ayahuasca ceremony. It was over a period of 3 days. If anyone's unfamiliar, it's a potion that's been used for a myriad of time in South America for various different purposes, subject to what the rest of that recipe is beholden to, and utilized by the shamans for asking questions, guiding individuals and collectives. It's essentially two plants, Banisteriopsis and Psychotropia. Got the name wrong. Those two combined are a very powerful form of DMT, which, as you're fully aware, can have some profound effects on us, disembodying this flesh suit and inhabiting other realms and seeing and experiencing some non-dual states and learning experiences that we don't get in our day-to-day lives. And through, if done with intention and purpose, can be extremely beneficial. Of course, we're only cottoning onto that now again, since it was sort of repressed in the 60s from the hippie movement. We're now realizing again that these are our plant allies, and they're not here to harm us, they're here to help us. And when you take on that lens and are used with the proper intention, with the skillful people, can bring about vast change for us as individuals, for us as a collective, and also remedy some of the industrialized challenges, mental challenges that we see rife in our communities, whether that be depression or ADHD or anxiety. The benefits are astronomical. So my hope that someday is that they become blended into the fabric of our culture. But yeah, I hope that answered that question, mate. I could go on for a bit.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And I think one thing to highlight there that's well, two things I think that are important. So the fact that the shamans and the Amazonians were able to find that combination of two plants, so the chacruna leaf and the ayahuasca vine, and to work out that they would go together. I mean, it was like a 1 in 10,000 or something chance of that happening, which is just mind-blowing in itself. So there's something that is telling us that they had a real connection with their landscape or the plants in that way. And the second thing I think that's important is that that DMT is actually a natural hormone or what would you say, neurochemical that is released in the body at times of, say, birth and at death. So that's when people explain when they have a near-death experience, where they have timelessness, where they have this sense of seeing their whole life flash before their eyes. And so it's produced naturally, but it's because it's produced naturally, we couldn't just be going around off our rocker all day when it is produced, because it's in plants and in our food and all sorts. So it's broken down really quickly. So that's what they were able to figure out, which is amazing, is that they had an inhibitor, which is that's why they blended them together, that actually stops the breakdown of that DMT. So it's a drawn out experience. So I think that's important to highlight. So this isn't something that's just a completely foreign compound. It's actually something that's resides in the brain and is produced quite regularly.
Yeah, and can be accessed through breath work, and also through deprivation.
Okay. Yep.
So breath work, whether that be holotropic or other forms like, what's his name, guy that swims in the frozen water?
Wim Hof.
Wim Hof.
Yeah.
All those guys have worked out how to access that endogenous DMT that resides in us. But what's also interesting is the taking away all our senses, whether that be, and I think Aubrey Marcus recently did a darkness retreat, and that the people have been using darkness retreats for a long time, but he actually did a little documentary on it, on that experience. And kind of day 3 of deprivation, which means no light, no sound, nothing. The endogenous DMT started to kick in, and he was, for the next 3 days, on a different plane. Wow. And what he was able to access through that experience, and the beauty that the challenges, the internal stuff, the external stuff, what he was able to process and go through in that period was, again, another pivotal moment in his existence in the flesh suit. So coming back to here was it's worth seeing if anyone wants to ping that one.
Absolutely.
That's a cracker. But yeah, the importance of us being able to understand and access this ancient kind of technology is probably a really vital ingredient for as we move forward collectively into the new paradigm or new world.
100%, mate. And I would love to circle all the way back around and get back to this topic, because it's one that I'm very passionate about, that obviously you're passionate about. But I think just for some listeners, to set a bit of context, I'd love to know where your journey started and what made you go on that soul searching quest around the globe, and then fast forwarding to where you are now and the work that you're doing.
It's a really big question, David. But I guess to try and break it down into simple terms, it was a quest for meaning. And I think that's something that I grew up lacking, and probably a lot of humans in the Western cultures grow up lacking meaning or purpose. So I went out trying to find it. Still didn't find it. But when I did find it was when I kind of finally became happy in my own skin in a way, and having those experiences, those beauty and that amazing diversity that life is. I still didn't find it. It was only when I stopped and started listening internally that I found what my purpose and what my passion really is. And then the trick was after that was to finding, well, where does it sit in this realm? Well, where does it sit in society or in my economy, or what makes sense? Where does that make sense? And luckily enough, I think I might have cracked it, but we'll wait and see.
Oh, mate. So when someone asks you what you do for a job, what do you say? Or like, how do you explain what you do? I mean, I know it's like you said, you've embraced that diversity, and you obviously don't do one certain thing. You can't just say, I'm a chippy or whatever. But how would you explain your role and the work that you do at the moment?
Work in progress. I think, to encapsulate what I do at the moment, try and be of best service to humanity as I can, and try and live in accordance in harmony with nature. So melding those two together means what activity is that? Well, right now it's trying to help shift our food system to something that's healthy and in harmony. I think that answered your question, mate. I could elaborate a little bit further though, couldn't I?
You certainly could.
how did I come to that space, or what is that space? Is how do we engage people to start being not only responsible for themselves, but to take some form of responsibility for the world they inhabit, because we are unfortunately live a pretty disconnected life from it, and we need to have that experience, like we've both had some of those profound experiences of that separate self being an illusion, and that we are actually connected to nature, therefore we're connected to the food we eat, and we need to stop relying on others and making decisions for our health and our happiness, and giving away all that, because we have the power to take that on board and make those changes that we need to live fulfilled, purposeful, passionate, and engaged lives. And that's the happy place I've come to. I'm filled with passion and purpose. I engage with so many people daily and love it. And I know where I'm headed. And I might have taken 30 years to get there. And I don't really know what the right recipe for that is for any individual, but
yeah.
How can my job allow for that to unfold for others? And it just so happens that my focus of those others are farming communities and also consumers that buy and eat food. Well, how did I get here? We might have unpacked a little bit of that, but when it comes to the pointy bit of food system change, Farmers Footprint, Smart Soil, our collaboration, I think what it is for me personally is the ability to focus my passion and purpose into a vehicle, which is really key to find what is that agent of change you can attach yourself to that has some legs, has some scalability, has reasonable potential to make meaningful change. That's why I'm on board and why it's taken me so long to get it to this point. We and really happy and honoured to have so much of a network supporting this vision and mission, including yourselves. Like, I know you guys know, but those listeners out there, I sort of sit on the fence. That's not in any way except for agricultural fence between a restaurant, as in food provider, and as an actual farmer and liaison to farmers. So inhabit both sides of the fence, and through that lens have been able to discern what I should be doing in this space. I've got a horticultural diploma. I've done my PDCs. I've had, farming projects. I've been a chicken, meat, bird farmer. I've done all this stuff. I've owned restaurants on the other side of the fence, run restaurants, all that kind of stuff. So where should my attention lie, and where should my focus be? It's kind of exactly what I'm doing now. That's trying to bring them all together and looking a little bit bigger picture on what the future is for viability and health outcomes for everyone involved in that circus. So here I am at Farmers Footprint, really honoured to be collaboratively working with you guys at Smart Soil, with the guys at Carbonate, being auspiced by an amazing charity called Odonata, have the wisdom and tutelage and network of great people like Darren Doherty, Regrarians, and then access to all these other amazing educators and innovators like you guys have with Colin and the Haggertys, and then you've got the Massies sitting on top of all that. So it's a really exciting place to inhabit, and I've finally given up my imposter syndrome to start sitting amongst it and being of good use and service.
Mate, I'm so grateful to have you now coming out of that and putting your energy and your experience into this direction, because I think you touched the heart of it there with how do we create scalable impact that impacts cross systems, whether it be the food, the health, even the environment at large, with farmers building biodiversity and whatnot. So, mate, I'm just so excited, like you said, and so grateful to be sitting with the crew that we're sitting with, and to have access, like you said, the tutelage. And that's the first time I've heard that word, but I will be using it in the future.
Don't.
Mate, so what is the first off the bat with Farmers Footprint? And maybe you can just do a very top level introduction of Farmers Footprint for those that haven't heard of it before. And then we'll go into where we're going to start with Farmers Footprint Australia.
So Farmers Footprint is the vision and manifestation of a couple of guys in the US, one of them being Dr. Zach Bush and the other David Leon. Zach had put together a video first of what is to be a docuseries based around what they thought was looking at chemical usage in the States. He was a 3-board certified doc, so he's an extremely smart cat. But what sits on top and around that is an inquisitive and visionary mind. And he started with, I'll just give a quick synopsis because I think it's relative and we'll give some context. He started his own health clinic and was feeding all the patients and clients all this health food, but not seeing the results that he expected. So he kind of dived into a little bit deeper about, well, what's the nutrient, what is this food and where's that coming from that I'm feeding them, and realized that there's such a discrepancy and challenge with getting actually healthy food onto the table because of the way we are farming and the chemicals that we're using. And he focused in some attention around glyphosate, and with the science background and the science team, they were able to bring out some white papers around what it does and how it's used and how it affects both soil and us in turn and our microbiome in the gut. And through all of that, was inspired to do a documentary around it, and having gone through that process, realized that we need to be focusing on the solution to all of this, whether that be helping people in his clinic with nutrient-dense food, or helping biodiversity and on-farm work or farmer health, and ensuring that we're not toxifying and kill off the biology in our soil and losing topsoil. It was food system change and something like regenerative agriculture. So they started Farmers Footprint as a reaction to that. Farmers Footprint is now an extremely successful charity in the States, which tells stories of that regenerative journey. I cottoned on to those guys about 18 months ago, and we've had great conversations, and through all that, we realised that it's time for Australia to have the next chapter, the next iteration of Farmers Footprint happen here in Oz, and tell the Australian story of regeneration, of the potential of food system change. And through that, we're now launching, and we've got our website live. We've got funded, and we're ready to take action. So let's dive into what that is.
Let's go, mate. Let's do it. And how good's that, to have Farmers Footprint now focusing on Australia, and yourself heading it up with that, cross industry experience, being a farmer yourself, and then now into the food space, understanding what is required on both sides. Because that's one thing that we don't realize, is that if the consumer or the eater doesn't understand what regenerative food is and why it is different, then people need to buy the stuff, don't they? And to understand the story. So communicating that, I can just see that being a huge strong point for yourself, and for the work that you're going to head up at Farmers Footprint. So I'd love to, go into what the first steps are with Farmers Footprint Australia, where we're planning on heading.
We are all it's in our DNA that we're storytellers. You know, the oral history of the original people of Australia. You know, there's not much written down. It's all, so much of it's a beautiful oral history. We stopped telling the stories and we lost our way. And the importance of it is irrefutable. So we collectively see this as one of the key ingredients for amplifying and then accelerating any systemic change. We need for people to understand it and want to come on this journey, to realise the importance of it, the amazing byproducts of that change can help with so many of the challenges that we're seeing, whether that be water storage, if you think we need to lock carbon into the soil, biodiversity, health and wellness of people and planet. Changing a food system can solve so many of these issues. So that's kind of where we want to focus our attention, is telling those stories, whether that be the amazing farmers and guys which have been doing that for some time already. So those pioneers, those innovators which have a story to tell, but most of them haven't been told. We want to talk to the stakeholders which support that, because this is a supply chain. We've got a grower, we've got a seller, we've got a buyer. We need to be shining the light on the amazing guys which see this as the way forward. So I want to support that by buying off those farmers or giving them access to market. And then we want to engage the consumer, because they're the guys that, through their discernment of buying, and if they understand the importance of what this shift can do and how that is affecting them as well, because they're actually eating good food that hasn't been toxified with chemicals, or is coming from, it's coming from healthy soil and is vital and alive with nutrients which are bioavailable, then they come on this journey as well with us and start supporting and understanding and then knowing where their food comes from. And that harks back to what we spoke about earlier, which was self-responsibility. We need to give people permission to take that on again and not give away that to corporations or institutions. Got to stop that shit. Excuse my language. So that essentially our mission is to unite and inspire and accelerate the regenerative movement here in Australia. And that's to restore soil health, human health, and planetary health.
Amen, brother. How exciting. And I think, like what you said there, once the consumer does taste the food and feel the vitality that comes out of these foods, out of healthy systems, I mean, you can't go back. It's game over.
Once you know, you can't unknow.
Yeah.
And you never go back. And it's interesting when you look historically, just as a quick segue, that you look at where a average Joe Blow like myself, where most of my revenue goes every week, is to probably my rentals, because I live in the Byron Shire. But prior to the 1950s, I think most of our revenue or our hard-earned dollars went to the food that we ate, like 40%. And you kind of go, well, how'd that get lost? How has most of that been diverted to a landholder, owner, whatever story that is? And now we're minimizing how much we have to minimize how much we can spend on food, which is the one thing that gives us nutrition, the ability to live a wholesome and engage, healthy life. So, again, there's another inversion in our culture that needs to be rectified.
Absolutely. And all the middlemen, that are taking their cut off. I mean, people will still be thinking, listening to this, well, I still go shopping and it costs me hundreds of dollars a week and et cetera, et cetera. But, how much of that is actually making it to the farm or to the farmer that grew that produce? There's a real disconnect there, like you mentioned, and an outsourcing of responsibility once again. So to bring that back is huge. I mean, it's what builds healthy cultures. And I think we're seeing the effects of that disconnect now throughout our culture, whether it be with the rise in chronic disease, autoimmune disorders, all these these things that were just unheard of, even dementia, Alzheimer's, and that end of life suffering that families and individuals go through now. It's seemingly come out of nowhere. But with Dr. Zach Bush's work, I mean, it points back to the soil and the food that we're eating. And I just think that's so important for people to understand, is that it is all connected that way. And we do have the choice to go out and support farmers, to give them, the lion's share of the revenue, giving it straight to the farmer. And you get to meet your farmer, you get to be close to where that food's produced. You get to see the conditions in which it's produced. I mean, it's a win-win-win all the way. So super exciting, I think. Mate, can we talk a bit about what Farmers Footprint are planning to do? So we're going to tell more stories of the regenerative farmers. I mean, not many people know that Australia is a treasure trove of innovators and regenerative legends, and that's what a lot of Americans and things say is like, oh, wow, you guys down in Australia, you got it bloody good. They're everywhere. So I guess teasing them out and getting their stories out there, and then focus on education. The step after that.
So our three pillars at the moment are awareness, education, and support. So awareness being telling the stories we need to tell, hoping that that'll engage and inspire consumers to support and follow, and then take action. Hoping that we can engage farmers that are looking to transition and help them point them in the right direction. We're not going to play the educators, but we'll play the conduit too, because there is such, as you said, a treasure trove of amazing educators right across this land that are ready and willing to assist anyone in a transitionary. And I think one of our most important mantras at Farmers Footprint is progress over perfection. And what that encapsulates is that we don't want to bring dogma or judgment into the farming space. We want to engage on any person growing food that is on a trajectory to lessen their chemical usage, increase their biodiversity, healthy up their water cycle, and produce nutrient-rich food. So I think in essence, what that wants to do is we will extend the hand to anyone that wants to come along this journey, and not cast judgment on anyone in that story. And I think that for me is super important to embody. Otherwise, we're not talking to the people we want to talk to, and we become what unfortunately culture and society do so well at the moment, is divisive. Time for that's over. We are on a co-creative journey, and our job is to be really skillful about not creating divides as we go about our storytelling.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, like you say, it is the time for division. I mean, it feels like a divisive environment at the moment. But, strengthening the bonds with farmers and things that are real in agriculture, it builds culture, and community, and really fosters that. So I'm really excited to see where this heads, and to see what we can co-create and what sort of future we can build together. Because with those people out there that are imagining a better future and working towards that, I mean, anything is possible, really. We just have to dream it up and go get it.
I agree, my friend. So what we think is appropriate at the moment, and I'm very careful about projecting what I see as appropriate. I think for Farmers Footprint over the next 6 to 12 months, there's got to be lots of listening. And through that listening, we get to discern what is appropriate. But for the time being, we want to put our attention to telling stories, engaging people, bringing them on the journey. We have an amazing Mighty Networks community that's already active, and bringing those that want to be more activated into that space where there's so much value in fireside chats with farmers and super interesting cats which are involved in that space, a peer-to-peer kind of vibe. But I think what's for us, where we want to put our attention and our focus is a documentary on Australia as we see it now. The US Farmers Footprint brought out a docu-series, and we think it's appropriate to do our own here with an Australian flavour, an Australian story, and an Australian nuance. And for me, that feels as if it could be our calling card to invite people on the journey. Like I can talk a lot, but I can't talk to everyone. And a film's going to do a better job than, you know, my great head for radio banging on to people. So we, as a team, we kind of agree that that's probably where our attention should be, and we'll build and allow us, it will be sort of be our business card to move and engage people everywhere across the country. So it will be a thing of beauty. It will be something that people can, from all walks of life, will enjoy and also be inspired by. I'm talking out of tune because I don't know, we haven't made it yet, but that's what I'm hoping.
Mate, I'm sure it will be. Everything you touched so far, so turns to gold. Let's go.
That process as well is that collaborative want and desire to work with guys like you and the Smart Soil team on bringing to life what we kind of think collectively that it's pretty potent. Some programs we can help fundraise for, which are based around farmer health and wellness. I don't know how much we want to devolve and dive into that right now, but I think something like that, through having lots of conversation, again, is something that is appropriate and something that might be missed in most of the mainstream farmer narrative. And I see as a huge potential, but also a huge need to put some attention and focus on, because it's not an easy space. I've tried farming, and it's the toughest gig in the world. And over the last 40 years, our farmers have decreased in number by half. Some of that could be due to, you know, people being bought out by larger corps, but a lot of it's due to a lot of other reasons. Double the amount of farmers suicide every year than any other subset or group in Australia. Like, it's a really tough gig, and we have spoken about, and I think there's something beautiful in this, is that a healthy farmer has healthy land. There's a mirror feedback loop attached to that relationship. So maybe that's where we should be putting some attention to.
Absolutely, Blair. And I mean, we are on the Mind Body Soil podcast, so, you know, that's what we are trying to really get the dialogue out, and to let farmers know that there are tools available, there's support available. There are others out there that are just like them, that are going through the same shit, that just want to support each other, and to know that there is someone else, you know, that is going along with them for the journey. So I'm really excited to be building something, like you say, that is of great need. Anyone that's been out to the rural communities knows that, you know, there's bugger all good food available for starters. You know, I mean, that's something that we can address quite easily. It's all about, there's a lot of things that need fixing, you know, and I think, like you said, responsibility, coming back to that, is a huge part of it, and being held accountable even for farmers, you know. I think that's a big thing that community brings, and connection to others. So yeah, really excited to head in that direction. And you've actually started us into this space, which I wanted to go next, which is that healthy farm, healthy farmer, healthy farmer, healthy farm reflection. You know, it really is a mirror. And I think I've spoken to every guest so far about their experiences seeing this out in real life, and what it looks like and what you've experienced. So, I mean, you can definitely confirm that what you've witnessed out there is bang on. So, you know.
Yeah, and it's amazing that, you know, when that stream of, what's it called, stream of consciousness, when when something floats itself in the ether there and you've got like-minded people, we all sort of dive, we all sort of see that around the same time and start having conversations about it. Sure, it's not stream of consciousness, but
it's like quantum thought or something. Or
yeah, something that I don't understand because I'm meek and mild, but I can certainly experience it and talk about it. That's happening with this right now. Yeah. There's so many people which are having that realization of that mirroring of, and my experience verifies that when I've gone to a vibrant, healthy farm, I've met a vibrant, healthy farmer. And when I've got onto a less than healthy farm, or one that might be suffering some neglect, then that farmer's neglecting themselves as well. Yeah. So wouldn't that be a beautiful covert operation to go, no, you're not farming, you're not doing anything wrong on the farm. We're just going to help fix you. We're going to help get you, whether that's a self-esteem or a biological, or a spiritual or a mental issue that you're carrying, or generational trauma, whatever that story is. There's guys out there, there's experts in this field that we can access that can help. And then what we'll see from that beauty and that remedy and that healing, we'll see the land will just be a byproduct of that farmer. And that'd be a magical thing to witness or take part in. I don't know if we're right or wrong, but let's give it a shot.
Absolutely. It definitely feels right anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes that's what you have to sort of come back to, you know.
And I think our own personal experiences beyond this is taking it beyond farming. I know personally that if I'm looking after myself, meaning I'm eating well and I'm exercising and I'm meditating and I'm doing all those things, those self-care key items, what I bring to the world is something that I'm extremely proud to be bringing. Yeah. And it's coming from a place of love, and it's coming from it's you know, the opposite side of that is when I'm not taking care of myself and I'm sitting in a trauma space, or I'm angry or whatever thing I'm not dealing with, I reflect that back on my partner. Sorry, honey. I reflect that on my kids. Sorry, guys. You're used to me now. Yeah. But at least I've got to the point now which I can see this rolling out, and I can direct my attention to it and remedy that in whatever way, shape, or form I need to. So this is not, you know, it's not a farmer land thing. This is a human and how we live in the world kind of thing, right?
Well, exactly. And I think that's one thing that we all need to remember is we are, you know, humans. We're all of us, you know, and there are certain needs for our mind and our body and spirit to function correctly. And like you say, those pillars just need to be addressed. And if we can equip farmers and people in that, for that matter, with tools that they can use when they do feel a bit out of whack, or you know, like something's not right, like they're starting to get a bit short with the people around them, then and they can snap out of that and change that. I mean, that shit changes culture or builds. It's phenomenal. So challenge accepted. Let's do it. In saying that, so what are some of the tools that? So you mentioned meditation. I know before we got on the chat or started recording, you mentioned that you had been out. I'm not sure exactly where you said you went to, but you have consciously gone out into nature to recharge. I mean, what are these some tools that you'd be able to share with us that from your experience that help you sort of snap out of that? Or if
it needs to be like I've been fortunate enough to do lots of stuff in my life, and some monastic training around meditation is one of them. So it's probably the most reliable and potent tool in my arsenal that I can use to keep me engaged in love and keep me engaged with whatever you want to call it, God or the source, whatever.
Yeah.
But beyond that, in connecting as I think we've spoken about earlier in our conversation, is that connection to nature is so important. Like embodying that and experiencing that non-separate self from nature. Like we are part of it. We get indoctrinated into this world and ripped away from it. And that's how we exist. It's like how do we bring people back or invite them back to the earth where they can connect themselves? Like, it's amazing what grounding does. If anyone not familiar with grounding, is just take your shoes off and walk on the earth. Like what that does to our frequency, to our energetic self is quite beyond. It's scientifically ticked off fact. Not that means too much these days. But stuff like I get into the veggie patch. I'm a happier person.
Breathe some soil, breathe some nice compost. Yeah,
exactly. Get my hands dirty. Like how good do you feel when you got dirt under your fingernails and you like, that's all therapy that I need to do. And if I don't do, I'm neglecting that part of myself, and I go back into robot unhappy Blair, which starts to, his anger. He probably wants to have a drink because he needs to
run away.
Yeah. All that story, all that stuff comes back because it's only just sitting there. We have to keep it at bay. It's like the darkness and the light inhabit together. We've just got to work out how they inhabit together and not let one rule the other, kind of thing. So tools that I use, diet's a really good one as well. Yeah. Like not drinking excessively. Big one. Our culture's challenged by that because like you grew up in the same way. It's like that's our reward to ourselves somehow, is to put a toxic substance in our body.
And a lot of it too.
And a lot of it. Like I really enjoy a wine, but I'm a half glass kind of guy now. And
half glass full as well, right?
Yeah, I can say that really proudly.
Good on you, mate.
I've been through that darkness. I've had some pretty serious issues with alcohol. I owned restaurants. I was in the nightclub game. Like I did all that stuff, and it wasn't good and it wasn't healthy. So, diet's a key one for me to stay sane, to nurture my body, to give me the energy that I need every day, and I need a lot of it. I got kids. I got this. I got lots of stuff. I expend a lot every day. Breath is key. Like when in that you feel those stress points pop up, something's happened in your day, and you're like, and suddenly you feel your breath is up here, and you're like, oh, hang on a minute, just bring it back down, and moving from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic nervous system. It's amazing how quickly you can just change that, and how that stressor, which normally triggered you and you went off onto your thing, and then you'll go and have another coffee, and you'll probably have to have a glass of wine at the end of the day to calm that down. It's like, what are we doing to ourselves? But stuff like that is just, it's imperative, and I do use it daily. Like I'll hear something that triggers me, and I'm like just calm down, idiot.
Just breathe through the nose.
Relax. And exercise. Which I haven't been doing a lot for a while, but I've just got back into the routine of. Damn.
Oh, powerful.
How good are those endorphins?
I know, right? And they're all self-generated, it's insane. And I think this comes back to what you were pointing to at the start with taking responsibility. We all have the option to either dwell in our own hubris and our own self-loathing, or we can go do some exercise, make ourselves sweat, go do the work, breathe properly, or just treat ourselves with something like that, and that's always available. And I think that's insane that we get so busy that we leave those things to the side. And I think that's part of the whole problem with our farming system, is that people don't feel like they have the time to be able to meditate. Most of the time you say meditate and people think about, someone cross-legged levitating for an hour or in a quiet space. But even if it's 5 minutes, even if it's 3 minutes, and you're sitting there consciously checking in, it's It's powerful stuff, and you're going to find room. You're going to create room to do more of it. Even with the exercise thing, you start doing it, you realize that net positive effect. Your body's telling you, hey, this is good shit. I want to keep, you need to keep doing this. And it seems so simple, and I always come back to that. It's bizarre how, the whole fine 30 thing, or like, just doing 30 minutes of exercise, that's all we really need. I mean, most of the time farmers get putting in hard graft anyway. So to do exercise is probably like, oh, I can't be buggered, at the end of the day. But perhaps just doing some of your work with mindfulness, and there it is. All of a sudden, instead of picking up sheep all day and tossing them into the ring or whatever, you're doing it mindfully with good technique or breathing. It's as simple as that. So
or to support the ability to keep doing that. It's like, well, you gotta look after your body. So let's do some stretches. Let's, it's so exciting for the potential to bring this to life. And we can talk. I can talk about it because I'm actually done it. Unfortunately, our culture, our indoctrination, doesn't allow us to love self or support self or take care of self. We just get railroaded by the work ethic. You got to be, the debt then comes in, and then we just get railroaded by
cheap dopamine,
a really toxic, toxic economy and toxic culture.
Yeah,
and we've all done it, so we don't have to beat ourselves up. It's like, here's the light, but don't beat yourself up because you haven't been doing it. Don't think you're anything, because that was my problem as well. Is like, have I wasted all this, or I won't acknowledge that I've been led down the wrong pathway. It's like being okay with yourself and not being critical on yourself and not judging yourself or being too hard on yourself, because Aussie males have a tendency to do that. We are pretty stoic. We're pretty emotionally challenged. And we need to just start evolving through some of those processes so we can be the best we can be for ourselves, for our family, for our community, and for the land that we walk on.
Absolutely. Amen, brother. And when you are operating from that space of love and you have seen that, it makes it really hard to go out and then mistreat land, to go out and spray chemical out over thousands of hectares. I would almost say it's impossible, or at least you're going to beat yourself up pretty hard if that's what you're doing and you're conscious of it, So I think where you're heading with this is, how do we get connected to country, right? Like, how do we, because as soon as you are, those decisions that you make about your land, being a land steward as opposed to an owner, where you're commodifying land, which is ridiculous in the first place. What does that look like for a farmer? Or, I'm still challenged by what that is, but we've done some interesting stuff around it. There's an amazing fella here called Jambi, which he does connection to country. So I had the idea of pulling a few farmers into the room and him walking them through that from an Indigenous perspective. And I thought it would be pretty powerful, because I'm pretty turned on by it all. And I learn a lot from him, and trying to find my way is, what is my connection to country, and how do you access that realm, and how do you unlock the key? And I try and use my white fella brain to understand how to get there. And it's like, okay, give up on all that for starters, because that's not how you get there. Yeah. So I invited a bunch of land stewards into a room and had Jambi come and talk about connection to country. Half of them left by halfway through, but enough of them hung on to kind of go, okay, just
changing that perspective of what your land is to you. Yes, you use it as an economic tool, but what sits behind that? It's, where's your legacy and what do you want to leave for the coming generations? And how do you converse with that land? And it's been pretty interesting having conversations post that experience with guys, because they want to know more and they want to go deeper. And you can see just their perception of what they are to that land and what that land is to them shifting to a healthier space, to a happier space, to one where there's some reciprocity and a bit of a feedback loop. And that was really encouraging. So I think, again, that's another layer that we can be introducing to everyone, not just farmers, but all of us inhabiting this country. It's like, let's try and work out who we are in relationship to it, I guess.
Absolutely. That's exactly where I was heading with that.
Thought so.
Oh, mate. Well, I must just say, Blair, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate, chatting with you today. And I'm, again, just so grateful and so excited to continue working alongside you and to build something beautiful and of real value for the global community. So is there anything that you would like to put out at the end of this chat? Yes. I'm sure we'll chat again, but
yeah, I can't believe you cut me off already. I'm just getting warmed up.
we can get going.
But I hear you, mate. We've probably covered enough territory for now, and if people are interested, we can do it again.
Absolutely.
There was something that, just to finish off with, there was something that really resonated with me from a guy that I think could become the prophet of our time, called Charles Eisenstein. And I highly recommend people to follow his work. He's talking about visioning a future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And painting some sort of picture of the future. And it's just, I heard it, so I read it today, and then I called another mate and said, dude, and he's like, yeah, I know. And it was completely unconnected. I didn't know he knew about his work. And again, it was just something bubbling up.
Yeah.
And it was looking at what does the future like in all its complexity, because we know that we can't fix the challenges that we have in front of us with a reductionistic perspective, right? They're all interconnected. It's like this beautiful, and that's our evolutionary trajectory, is to more beauty and more complexity, is what I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at that, what is the future, and how do we bring about an inspiring quote that people can then take on within their own realm or their own experience? And I should read it out because I'm talking it up, right?
Yeah.
A mosaic of local projects animated by a shared idea.
Mm.
And that really struck me as really beautiful.
Can you read that again, please?
A mosaic of local projects animated by a shared idea.
Mm.
And I look at that and go, oh, I can see that now. We've all got this shared idea and this shared vision, but we need to have it localized, because our food system needs to be localized, because there's no carte blanche across it, especially across this continent, because it's so vast and it's so extreme and it's so diverse.
Yeah.
So having all these local nodes that are then interconnected, it's like, oh, hang on a minute. That's how the original people did it, isn't it?
Oh, mate.
It's like, fuck, we're just going to start listening again.
Well, exactly. It's easy to just dismiss it because you hear it so much. But it's that simple, isn't it? And it's that important that it's all here for us. It's been done before. All we need to do is listen and have a look, and there it is. So I'm certainly animated by the shared ideas, and I really look forward to creating more together. So
You too, brother.
Big love.
Kudos to all you guys are doing and all that you're bringing forward. Love you guys dearly. Look forward to collaborating well into the future. And let's do this, and let's co-create what we see, what we want, and what we need. Thank you.